And now let's listen to Jen's story in her own words.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to the Norwich Bookstore for having me tonight. And I brought my brother with me, who is featured in the book. And so I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about the book and then read from the book and then take some questions and answers. So the book is actually about a lot more than just the mittens and the sudden internet fame. It's in two parts. The first part covers my childhood and young adulthood, and it talks a lot about crafting and how I got into crafting and creativity and the role that that played in my life, which was very much a role of healing, and it was sort of like a way that I made peace with the world. And so in every sort of event that I describe in the book, I go back and talk about a craft that I made in response to it. So on September 11th, I ended up getting stranded in North Carolina, and I made this beautiful quilt. And so that's one chapter in the book. When I came out and was struggling with homophobia, I made a t-shirt quilt. That's another chapter in the book. And then about halfway through the book, well, in the first half, I talk also about learning how to make the mittens and a small crafting business that I had with a friend of mine. And then we parted ways because I had a baby. But I was still making mittens, and I gave a pair to Bernie Sanders. So it describes that pair of mittens and the sweater that they came from. And then the second half of the book, I'm going to read from the first chapter of the second half of the book, really talks about the phenomenon of sudden internet fame and being just a normal person, a school teacher in the pandemic. And then this outrageous thing happened to me. And then what I did with it ultimately, which was to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for charities in Vermont, for nonprofits. And so in the second half of the book, I grapple a lot with the people's opinions about what I should do with all of that sudden notoriety and the mitten frenzy versus what I felt that I should do with it. And I talk a lot about, like, well, what would it mean if I just left the life that I know and love and pursued this other thing based on trying to get rich quick or pursuing something that wasn't my original dream. And then I return in the second half of the book to a lot of the crafts and the lessons and the things that I discuss in the first half of the book to sort of tie things up in the end. But since my brother is here, I thought that I would read from this chapter that features him. I'm one of 6 children, and so don't tell anybody I know this is being videotaped for just the locals, but this is my favorite sibling. Chapter 13, The Dings. That's how it started. January 2021. What was your first sign? Like, what was the first moment that you knew something was up? What was the meme you saw? People always ask me these questions. They want to recount the glory with me, the awe of sudden internet fame. It started with the dings on my phone, I respond. I was remote teaching in my classroom. It was a very snowy day. I was alone. So, did you immediately go online and see all the memes, they ask? No, I was teaching. Teaching is a one-track lane. You can't be online looking at memes and teaching at the same time. Teaching is all-consuming. These facts surprise people. So, what did you do when your phone started dinging? I silenced it. You silenced it? Yes. I did a lot of explaining in these early interviews about the nuances of online pandemic teaching and the need to be present for your students remotely. So the memes were flying around the internet. Someone found you on Twitter. Bernie was walking around the inauguration with a mysterious manila envelope, and you were teaching? Yes. I didn't think it was a big deal. I don't know how many times I told this story. After a while, all the interviews blended together. Internet fame is a little like being struck by lightning, except the odds of survival are probably better. It used to be that in order to become famous, you had to be be first noticed by a particular kind of person, like a talent scout, agent, producer, or publisher. But the beauty of the internet is that those gatekeepers of fame are now being usurped by the general public. Ordinary people rise to fame just for being noticed by other ordinary people. I love the shattering of a glass ceiling, or gate in this case. However, by 2021, nearly a year into the pandemic, I had grown to cherish the privacy of my life. I didn't want to be famous. People talk about the phenomenon of FOMO, fear of missing out, but I jokingly told everyone that during the pandemic I had discovered JOMO, the joy of missing out. I just wanted to stay home and spend time with my family and our friends. People asked me in interviews over and over if I knew Bernie was going to wear the mittens to the inauguration. No. Was I surprised when this happened? Yes. Could I have ever seen this coming? Not really. I mean, the mittens went viral once before, but I thought that was the end. Can any of us see what is beyond our imagination as it barrels towards us in the dark? In the summer of 2009, I flew out to Skagway, Alaska to visit my brother Ryan. He was working as a train conductor on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad. Ryan is an industrious man, 8 years younger than me. He had endeared himself to just about everyone in that little town. He was known for picking up odd jobs on the side. He frequently traded his carpentry skills for delicacies such as moose meat or homebrewed beer. That year, he had acquired a shrimping permit and kept 2 shrimp pots in Naku Bay. One sunny afternoon, after he got off work, Ryan asked if I wanted to go with him to check his shrimp pots. A friend had lent him a canoe. We come from a big canoeing family, and I thought this sounded fun. We drove out to Matthews Creek and parked the car near the sandy beach at the head of the bay. The ocean was still and calm as we paddled out to the empty plastic laundry detergent bottles Ryan had tied to the rope attached to his shrimp pots. I could see the makeshift buoys resting on the water. They were way out near the entrance to the bay, almost to Dia Point. Luckily, they were colorful and easy to find. When we reached the buoys, I steadied the boat while Ryan began pulling up the line. The wet rope was heavy and awkward in our boat. We were wearing life jackets, but I really didn't want the canoe to tip and dunk us in the frigid glacial water of the bay. We were a long way from either side of the shore. The haul from Ryan's first shrimp pot contained at least 30 giant shrimp and 2 Dungeness crabs. "That's dinner!" Ryan called, his goofy little brother's smile beaming in the sun. He was almost done pulling up the second trap when we saw the first blow from the whale. It was maybe 20 feet off the starboard side of the canoe. It was loud, like the air dryer at the end of a car wash, but brief. At the end of the spray of water that forced up from the back of the whale was an almost human-like grunt. "Shoot, shoot, shoot!" Ryan's panicked voice sent a shocking fear response through my veins. That's not the word that I said, but since this is going to be aired on TV. "What should we do?" I asked. My knees turned to jelly, and my feet were anchored to the canoe as if about to run. Realizing that there was nowhere to go, I squeezed the handle of my paddle with a fierce and fearful grip. "I can see the shrimp pot," Ryan said. "I almost have it." "No, drop it. We need to get out of here." "Steady the boat," Ryan called, and in one large heave, he pulled the second shrimp pot up into the canoe. He was working quickly now, hands shaking and red from the water as he dumped the still wriggling shrimp out onto the space around his feet. Oh my God, I held my breath and watched as the dark shadow of the whale approached the side of the boat. One flick of its powerful tail would send us careening into the air. We hadn't seen another person all afternoon. There would be no one to save us once we landed in the icy water. Oh my God, I repeated. It was all I could think of to say. I gently put my paddle down and held on to the gunwales of the canoe as the silent creature slowly passed below and the water beneath us turned black. "Don't panic, I'm almost done," Ryan whispered, trying not to aggravate the giant mammal below. My knuckles turned white as Ryan put some more bait in his traps and prepared to throw it overboard. The strange thing was, despite the whale's proximity to our boat, the surface of the water remained calm. As suddenly as the water went black, it turned back to the turquoise blue of the glacial runoff. I wasn't sure it had really passed or just dipped deeper into the endless depths. It looked like the coast was clear. Do you see it? Ryan asked. We peered over both sides of the boat, half expecting the giant to rise up like Old Faithful beneath us. When Ryan was little and I was a preteen, we shared a room for a few years. In the morning, he used to get up before me and play quietly with his toys. He wasn't allowed to wake me up, but sometimes he would creep up to the bed and look at me. I would hear him breathing and feel his face inches from my own. I would open my eyes and go, "Boo!" He would squeal and laugh, his blue eyes shining. He looked up at me now with those same blue eyes, a hint of a smile on his face. He lived for moments like these. He saw this situation as an adventure. I saw it as a calamity. I figured I might be a strong enough swimmer to make it to the shore, but I knew Ryan was not a strong swimmer, and I would never leave him. If the whale flipped our boat, Ryan would die of hypothermia, and I would die trying to save him. I spent those moments with the whale beneath us, steeped in the kind of fear and love an older sister has for her much younger brother. Ryan experienced the whale as a thrill. This was how we were intrinsically different. We hesitated for another moment before we saw a second blow in the distance off the port side. Heading back out to sea, in one quick toss, Ryan hurled the shrimp pot over the side of the boat, the coiled rope whipping out from the bottom of the boat after it. "Let's get out of here," he said. As he returned to his seat at the back of the canoe, we paddled directly toward the shoreline near Daya Point and followed the coast back to the beach at Matthews Creek. The paddling was slow as we worked against the tide. We constantly scanned the horizon for signs of the whale. When I think back on that day, I replay that experience in my head as if I were watching it from a plane overhead. Ryan and I look like two tiny dots on a sliver of a boat, and the whale, the size of 25 elephants, swims ominously below. The sheer majesty of it is breathtaking. There have been very few experiences in my life that matched the fear and awe of that moment. If I had to compare it to any other one thing, it would be the quiet chaos that ensued in January and February of 2021, when out of the blue, my quiet life was shattered by the mass media frenzy around Bernie Sanders at the inauguration, wearing a pair of mittens that I had made for him. And that's where I'm going to end. Thank you. So from that part in the book, I go on to discuss many sleepless nights and my inability to eat because it was so stressful, and the impact that the sudden internet fame had on my family and on my safety as people were impersonating me online, and the State of Vermont Attorney General's office, which opened an investigation and prosecuted people who were impersonating me, and how I got pulled into that investigation, and then also how I met all these very interesting people like Ari Shapiro and the cast of To Tell the Truth, which is a game show out in Los Angeles, and and I gave interviews and made lots of new friends, but also, it was a very busy and stressful time. And I ultimately partnered with the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory to make the mittens because 22,000 people reached out to me via email. And I couldn't make that many pairs of mittens, and I wanted to continue my teaching job. So I partnered with the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory, and now they're making mittens for everybody who wants them. And they created 10 new jobs, which is something I'm really proud of, with full-time jobs with benefits that went to new Americans. So a lot of really wonderful things ended up coming out of this experience in the end. But for me, what I wanted to do was tell the story in a book. And so that's my book, and it's available here. And are there any questions?
Are there a lot of other people copying you, kind of, and trying to get their mittens in the hands of famous people?
I don't know about that. I don't know if they're trying to get their mittens in the hands of famous people. A lot of people mailed mittens and hats and scarves and things that they knit to Bernie, hoping to create another moment with Bernie. And they did that to me, too. They mailed things to me. And Bernie and I both donated all of those mittens and hats and scarves to shelters with people experiencing homelessness. So we... no one has a need for that many pairs of mittens or hats. But a lot of folks who were selling mittens online already, their businesses totally exploded. And I was really happy for them because, there were people who were already trying to make a living as crafters or entrepreneurs on Etsy. And that wasn't the life that I wanted, but if it helped their lives, then I was happy for them, right? I didn't feel like I was competing with them in any way because we had we wanted different outcomes from the situation. Most of the time, I just wanted the situation to go away. But I couldn't really make it go away. And so I participated in it for good, for what I thought would be a good outcome.
Are you glad that you gifted Bernie those mittens? Would you have done the same thing again?
Yes. I don't regret ever giving a gift. I think gift giving is like my love language probably, but I might have told them not to wear them to the inauguration. But you can't predict these things. And a lot of good things came out of it. And my life dramatically changed as well because I didn't want to give up my teaching career to open a mitten factory. But privately, I was feeling kind of done with teaching. I had taught for 17 years, and over those years, the career had really changed. In fact, I think does anyone here know Barbara Barnier? She used to live in this town.
Barbara Barnes?
Barbara Barnes, right. That was her name.
She was a close friend of mine.
Yes. So it was not Barnier, it was Barnes. She was the acting director of the Upper Valley Teaching Institute when I was a student there. And anyway, I became friendly with her. And as we were driving in, I was remembering her house, and she had a beautiful property. Anyway, that got me off track. So if you think about how long ago it was that she was the director of the Upper Valley, now it's called Educators Institute. That's when I started teaching. And I think that I had changed and the profession had changed and I was looking for something else. But I wasn't looking to become a factory owner or an entrepreneur. I eventually realized that I wanted to become a therapist, and now I'm in school to become one. But yeah, I think for those reasons, if this hadn't happened, I don't know if I ever would have moved on in this way, Who knows? I have no regrets.
And there's the knitting store right around the corner. Do you foresee that you might be, since I assume this book probably just came out, but will you go around to knitting stores and talk it up? Or
Yeah. Well, I don't knit. The mittens weren't knit. They were made out of repurposed wool
Yes,
sweaters.
we showed them together, right?
Yeah, but it has been a pretty big book with crafters and knitters. And when I first started writing the book, a friend of my partner's mentioned to me, like, don't underestimate the power of writing a book about crafting, because there are so many crafters among us, and this is a book that really clearly connects crafting with healing, and I think so many people turn to crafting for those healing elements of, like, the peace that it brings and the serotonin that it releases, and the beauty of working with your hands, and then also having these handmade things that are gifts of the heart, much more valuable than a gift card. They're priceless. And so I have found that crafters and knitters are interested in this. After the inauguration, I gave about 30 different interviews, and one of the interviews was to a woman who was from Russia, and she was like, "You're really, really big in Russia." And I was like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, and in Eastern Europe." And I was like, I don't know why. And she was like, "Well, because of the knitting." And I was like, "But I don't knit." And she was like, "That's why they love you, because you're taking things that are, they all have a few knit sweaters that didn't come out right. Like, the arms are too long, the body's too short, it's too wide, too narrow, and you made famous something that they could do with all of these, flawed things that they've made." I thought that was really funny. So that's, like, my favorite joke. It's like, I'm really big in Eastern Europe. But I try not to let that go to my head. Any other questions?
Is there anything you feel like you learned from the experience? I mean, I know your life changed dramatically, professionally and personally,
Yeah.
I imagine, but can you, was there a truth that sort of came out of the whole experience?
I mean, I just feel like I learned so many little things. I realized how much I don't like it when people tell me that I should do this or I should do that. I like to say, don't should on me. Don't should on me. And I think that that's, it's so easy for someone who's not in the midst of a situation to think that they know what someone else in that situation should do. And unless you're in a situation, it is hard to know what someone else should do with what they know and what they want and what they're able to do. And in those moments when people were like, "You should make a waiting list and sell your mittens for $1,000 a piece and you could get rich quick." And my report cards were due that Friday. I was really busy teaching. I had a 5-year-old at the time. I'm married. I have a dog, a house. I didn't want to do that. I also felt like people should not spend $1,000 on mittens unless it's for charity. So that's where I got the idea to donate mittens, because there were so many nonprofits who lost out on opportunities to have their big fundraisers because of the quarantine. And I thought, if people are doing silent auctions, if these mittens, if somebody wants to spend an outrageous amount of money for mittens, then it should be for a charity, according to me. And so I donated mittens to Outright Vermont, which is an organization that supports LGBTQ youth, and to a dog rescue. But Outright Vermont was brilliant, and they created a website, and they made it so that you could bid on the mittens, or just if you were already outbid, you could just make a donation. And then other people donated like a crocheted Bernie doll and some other things. And it was a little ad hoc, but in the end, they made $54,000 from that. And because the person who won the mittens for $7,500, again, no one should spend that much money on mittens unless it's for a nonprofit. He donated the mittens back, and the second place winner then purchased them. And then he made a $10,000 match grant challenge for the next week, so that if they could get $10,000 from their donors, that he would match that with another $10,000. Anyway, Outright Vermont made a second week to their summer camp program, and I wrote about all of this in the book. And so the next summer, I went and volunteered at the summer camp program, and it was marvelous. Like, it was just a magical place. And in a time when queer youth were stuck at home and just, without the resources that they rely on, so many of them, to then for this organization to be able to serve twice as many children, because of something that I did. Like, initially, of course, it was like what they did. It was their use of the gift. But so yeah, I mean, I guess I learned about, just some compassion for the fact that people are doing the best they can. And in those moments after the inauguration, I was doing the best I could. And there were probably a lot of people who thought that I wasn't doing the right things, or wasn't making the most of it, wasn't getting rich quick, but I was doing what I knew how to do to the best of my ability. And just that knowing that, like, if we approach each other with the notion that we're all doing the best we can, then we are so much more gentle and empathetic with each other, and we live in a more kind and humane world. But if we approach each other with the kind of disdain that assumes that somebody isn't doing the best they can, then we create anger and hostility in the world that doesn't need to be there. Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm just going to work at 50%. I'm going to do my second best. Nobody does that. I think most people wake up in the morning and they do the best that they can with what they know. And when they know more, they do better. I think Maya Angelou said that. So that was another takeaway. Okay, well, I think that's the end of my talk then. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.